Welcome back to 20 Life Learners. Our speaker for today is Tamir Shklaz. He is a UCT graduate and founder of Quillo, South Africa's largest second-hand textbook marketplace. Tamir is dedicated to exploring the future of education and how technology promises to make it more affordable, accessible, and meaningful. He unpacks this topic by focusing on technological structures that are rapidly changing how we learn. From the increasing significance of YouTube educational videos to the relevance of South Africa in this universal debate.
To start off in a classic cliched way of any presentation, I'm going to start off with a quote, but one that's close to home and I really resonate with. And it's a quote by Nelson Mandela that says, "Education is the most powerful weapon you can use to change the world." And we all instinctively know this is true. We've all had first-hand experience of when education has been meaningful and fulfilling, how it's empowered us and even changed our lives. And when it's not, it can be frustrating, boring, or at worst make us actively resentful towards the thing that we were learning. So education is something we're all innately passionate about or interested in at the very least. And my particular experience with education, having gone through university and certain things that have happened in my life, has made me very passionate about this problem in particular. And I'm really excited to share some of my thoughts about it in this presentation. So to kind of kick off where I became passionate about education would have been in my third year of studies when I started a company called Quillo, which is an online textbook marketplace which grew to be one of the biggest in South Africa. And when I started it in third year, I started a company and very much stopped becoming a full-time student. 90% of my time was spent on the business and 10% of my time was spent on the company, and I moved entirely remote. I stopped attending lectures, labs, tutorials, everything. I studied entirely online. Blended was my reality from third year. And what this did is forced me to be hyper-productive and efficient in getting through my content in order to make sure I was keeping up in university and find creative ways to study online. The second thing that it gave me was unique insight into the student. And a lot of the textbooks that were being uploaded to Quillo were still wrapped in plastic. So people would end up spending thousands of rand on textbooks only to never use them and sell them secondhand for less, and they'll still be wrapped in plastic. That inspired a lot of questions for me, like why are we being given these things to buy that we don't use, and yet we have to break the bank to get? And how could this be done more effectively and more efficiently? So now, before continuing and talking about the future, I want to zoom out and ask, what's the purpose of education? And in an ideal world, the purpose of education is ultimately to enlighten people. It's about equipping people with the tools, mindset, abilities to live a meaningful and fulfilled life. But in reality, it's kind of to help you get a job. This is now an existential problem to the way society functions. McKinsey says that between 400 and 800 million jobs will be displaced by the year 2030. We're crying as many as 375 million people to switch job categories entirely. So this, what is the fourth industrial revolution, is an unprecedented revolution that will disrupt the world in a way we've never seen before. It dwarfs the first, second, and third industrial revolutions. The link to education is the following. Firstly, you're going to have hundreds of millions of people who are going to need to reskill their entire education. Here we're talking about drivers, marketers, potentially accountants. Sorry if you're studying accounting, admin assistants, etc. That's the one aspect, so for retraining. The other aspect is that our generation and our kids' generation will be working in the most volatile work environments in history, constantly needing to change jobs, learn new skills, learn and unlearn. So the education and the tools that we're equipped for will be vital in enabling us to survive in the modern economy. So that gives you, now that we've zoomed out into the bigger picture, I want to zoom back into the future and talk about how education is going to change. the particular aspect I want to focus on is the way in which we learn, how we actually learn. And my first big prediction is that the way we learn will be completely unrecognizable from today's classroom. So today's classroom looks a lot like this. This photo could have been taken from the 1930s, or it could have been taken from NLT for last year's accounting lecture. It hasn't changed that much since then. And here you have a teacher at the center of the lecture who is the custodian of information, and they're bestowing and giving this information out to the students. The students are then there to listen and somehow learn. Now, there are a plethora of problems associated with this model of classroom. The first one is that it's not customized to the student. And this is something we all instinctively know, that we all learn at different paces and speeds. When we're sitting in a lecture, we're all expected, 100 people are expected to learn and understand content at the exact same pace, at the exact same speed. If you miss one concept 5 minutes into a lecture, you lose the rest of the lecture because you don't understand the initial premise. Also, the problem is that it's passive. You're simply sitting there consuming information, not actively engaging with it. To transition into what the future is going to look like, I believe the future is going to look a lot more like what COVID has pushed education to currently be and what we're talking about prior to this presentation. Self-driven adaptive learning. Here, learning is happening by yourself. You're going through the content at your own pace and engaging with it actively. When you misunderstand something and don't understand something, you simply rewind the lecture, understand it, and carry on. You don't miss the rest of the lecture and start convincing yourself that you're bad at the subject. To build on top of this, future platforms not only are going to be like self-driven like this, they're going to be dynamic and adapt to you specifically. Future platforms will be able to dynamically identify the areas that you're struggling with and recommend hyper-personalized educational content in order to best optimize your educational experience. The same way that Facebook, Google, and YouTube gives you hyper-customized ads, so too can that be done for education. And you could be given the exact right piece of education in the exact right way, in the exact right time. The second problem with the existing kind of classroom model is that the same content is recreated year on year by millions upon millions of teachers. So the same grade 10 maths class, the same grade 11 accounting class, the same first year law class is taught again and again and is recreated again and again by millions of teachers. Not only is this incredibly inefficient, and you're probably wasting trillions of dollars on a worldwide scale recreating this content every year, it's particularly problematic when your teacher is bad. When you have a bad teacher that's then giving you this content, that is the difference between loving and hating a subject. And if at a grade 8 level you get a bad maths teacher or a bad English teacher, that is the kind of thing that can make you hate the subject forever and think you're not good at it and forever close that door. Whereas if you had just the right content and the teacher was simply there to guide you along the process, you wouldn't have the same problem that you currently have with bad teachers. And that brings me to the second way that this classroom model is going to change. There's going to be one central repository of exceptional educational content. And here we're talking about the best teachers in the world producing educational content at incredible production quality. I can predict a future where art and biology classes are taught with the same production value as blockbuster movies. And we're already seeing trends of that happening in Southeast Asia and Asian countries where EdTech is simply booming. And now I show YouTube here because YouTube already does this. You have some of the most incredible and exceptional educators in the world teaching on YouTube. And in all honesty, I didn't really study much from university. I studied a lot more from YouTube. My maths, coding, entrepreneurship, everything else was done through YouTube, not through university. So this is two ways that the how of education is very likely to change in the future. But teaching the wrong thing very efficiently doesn't solve the problem. Really what's happening is that there's an underlying systemic issue with the whole institution of learning. The what we study, when we study, and how we pay for it all needs to be fundamentally reevaluated. At this point, when writing my presentation, I asked myself if I should continue to present the philosophy of how I think this should change or open it to a conversation, because this is hard and I don't really know the answer. And it has a particular chord in a South African context. So, my university degree for electrical and computer engineering. All in all, with tuition, accommodation, everything else included, maybe cost me 300,000 Rand. However, in reality, I feel a more accurate picture of how I actually learned was this. The institution which ultimately educated me was YouTube, Google, and figuring shit out by myself. What I found was that every single course that I did was taught for free online by better teachers. Let me say that again. My 300,000 Rand degree was taught for free online by better teachers. All I really paid for, and all to a large extent we're paying for with university, is that piece of paper. It's that piece of paper that signals to employers that we're smart and worth being employed. But is that the most efficient system? Is that the way it really should be? And knowing this reality, and knowing the reality South Africa comes from in particular, where our educational careers were shaken to the bedrock by the Fees Must Fall movement, a movement that fought for affordable access of education for all, sends chills down my spine. The thought that we might be able to achieve the goals of Fees Must Fall and democratize education for all through a different means is a really interesting one, and one I'm looking forward to discussing, as well with the one of being like, why are we doing this? Why are we paying as much as we are for this piece of paper? But before I do, and before I open up for conversation, I want to end with this. From the 1976 Soweto uprisings, to the Roads Must Fall protests, to the Fees Must Fall protests, to the movement to decolonize education, all of these South African-led educational movements have sent ripple effects across the globe, which have sparked protest, debate, and change. South Africa has been an epicenter and a world leader in incentivizing and inspiring educational change. And I'm wondering, and I'm curious, if South Africa can once again be a world leader to truly redefine what education is and make it affordable, accessible, and meaningful for all.
Thank you to this week's Life Learner. Please stay tuned for our next video.